Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah.
When you hear about conservation, it can sometimes feel, well, pretty overwhelming, right?
Hmm.
Lots of stories about species declining, habitat shrinking. It's easy to feel a bit discouraged, like the problems are just too big.
Yeah, that feeling is totally understandable. But the sources we've been digging into for this deep dive, they offer a really powerful counter-narrative.
Right.
This collection, it isn't just focused on the challenges. It's really curated to show stories of real, actual success in conservation. They give you solid evidence that when, thoughtful action is
That's
taken,
been based on science.
exactly, science-backed action,
Hmm.
then positive change isn't just possible, it's actually happening.
And that's really our mission here. We want to unpack these stories, pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising details, and really understand how these wins were achieved.
Yeah, get into the mechanics of it.
Exactly, like a shortcut to being genuinely clued in on what's working in conservation right now. And we've got a real mix, haven't we? Big policy stuff, species comebacks.
Oh, yeah. Technology community efforts. It's pretty diverse. What really stands out is that there isn't like one single magic bullet. Success comes from lots of different angles, often working together.
Okay, so maybe let's start with something foundational. The Endangered Species Act, the ESA. It's hitting 50 years.
A huge milestone.
And these sources, they describe it as probably one of the most powerful legal tools in the U.S. for fighting extinction, protecting, what, over 1,600 species right now?
That's right. And you can draw a direct line from the ESA to some really iconic success stories. I mean, the bald eagle is the classic example.
A go-to example.
Totally. Pushed right to the brink. Partly pesticides like DDT thinning those eggshells.
Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. That connection.
Absolutely critical, raising awareness about DDT and chemicals like it.
Which eventually led to the DDT ban in the U.S., what was it, 72?
Precisely. And that ban, plus the eagle being listed under the original ESA back in '67, that gave them critical breathing room. But, it wasn't just policy.
No, it involved a lot of hands-on work, too.
Oh yeah, intensive stuff. Captive breeding programs, reintroductions.
So definitely not a quick fix. We're talking decades.
Decades, yeah. It took until 2007 for them to be delisted. But then, by 2021, the population was up over 316,000.
Wow.
It's just a clear example of long-term commitment, underpinned by that legal safety net really paying off.
And this policy angle isn't just a U.S. thing. The sources also mention Ecuador's Rights of Nature movement. That's pretty groundbreaking.
It really is. And just this year, 2024, a court there granted specific legal protections to Quito's Machanga River based on those rights.
So the river itself has rights.
Essentially, yeah, it shifts the perspective from nature as just a resource to an entity with inherent value and legal standing. It's a fascinating legal development, definitely.
Okay, all right. Shifting from the big policies.
Yeah.
Let's get into some of those individual animal stories.
Mhm.
Beating the odds. The red cockaded woodpecker. Down to like 1,400 nest clusters in the 70s.
Yeah, they're specialists,
Yeah.
Need those old growth pine forests in the southeast U.S., and so much of that was logged. But really focused management, creating the right habitat, prescribed burns, even putting in artificial nesting cavities helped them bounce back. Now over 7,800 clusters.
And off the endangered list.
At the list. Shows that specific habitat needs require really targeted solutions.
And then there's the Iberian lynx. One source called it the greatest recovery of a cat species ever achieved. That's a big claim.
It's an amazing turnaround. They were critically endangered in Spain and Portugal, but about 20 years of intense international work, habitat restoration, captive breeding, collaboration.
Wow. 20 years.
Yeah, it led to them being downlisted from endangered just this year, 2024. Really shows what international cooperation can do.
Okay, the California condor story. This one is just dramatic. Poaching, lead poisoning from ammo.
Yeah, lead in carcasses they scavenge. Huge problem.
Habitat loss, too. And by 1987, only 27 left. In the wild.
Just 27. In the entire world, it was desperate. And it led to this incredibly bold, maybe controversial decision at the time.
To capture all of them.
Capture every last one for captive breeding. Taking an entire wild population into captivity, I mean, that hadn't really been done on that scale.
Wow. The pressure must have been immense.
Huge stakes. But, the breeding programs worked. Reintroduction started. Numbers slowly climbed. By 2018, around 537 condors, wild and captive.
That's fantastic.
And then in 2019, the 1,000th chick hatched since the program began. Just incredible.
And I saw the sources mention the Yurok tribe. being involved in reintroductions.
Yeah, and that's so important. It brings in traditional ecological knowledge, deep cultural connections. The Yurok see the condor as sacred.
Right.
Their involvement adds this whole other vital dimension. It really shows how crucial partnerships are.
It's not always the big famous animals, though, is it? The Manito gecko, tiny thing, only on one island.
Oh, Puerto Rico, yeah.
Right.
Manito Island. And invasive black rats just wipe them out, basically.
The classic invasive species problem.
Yeah, this is a great example of tackling that specific threat head on. They launched targeted rat eradication campaigns back in the 90s.
Did it work?
It did. By 2014, the island was declared rat-free, and without the rats, the geckos just exploded. Population hit over 7,600 by 2019.
Wow.
And they got delisted. It just shows sometimes focused pest removal can have these massive positive results.
Okay, what about some other, maybe less well-known wins? The Foskett speckled dace, a fish in just one spring in Oregon.
Yeah, talk about restricted range, literally one spring. Threatened by, habitat use, water levels changing.
Well, what do you even do then?
Well, it had to be super focused. They actually moved some fish to a second nearby spring, like creating a backup population.
So at risk.
Exactly. Don't put all your dace in one basket. Plus, dedicated habitat restoration by the Bureau of Land Management, fencing off the area. Small-scale, precise stuff. Led to delisting in 2019.
And mussels. In the Licking River in Kentucky, that sounds more like an ecosystem thing.
It really is. Agricultural runoff dams, they'd really hammered the mussel diversity. 8 species just vanished.
Out of how many?
Out of 63 historically. But conservation work, including captive breeding for mussels, which is pretty specialized stuff, and reintroducing them, they brought 6 of those species back.
6 out of 8. That's amazing.
Yeah. Restored the river to like 96% of its historic mussel diversity. It really proves you can achieve significant ecological repair, even in systems that have been hit hard.
Okay. Shifting from species focus to place focus. Habitat restoration. The Klamath River dam removals get mentioned a lot. Biggest dam removal project in the U.S.
That's right, on the California-Oregon border. And it's about way more than just the dams. It's restoring the whole river system.
Letting the salmon run again.
Letting salmon get back to their spawning grounds upstream, yeah. First time in a century for some stretches. It's vital for the fish, for the tribes, for the whole ecosystem. Huge undertaking.
And another habitat story. The Louisiana black bear. Lost something like 80% of its habitat.
Yeah, by 1980, the bottomland hardwood forests they rely on were mostly gone. But its recovery, leading to delisting in 2016, was massively helped by voluntary programs for private landowners.
Working with landowners, not just regulations.
Exactly. Things like the Wetlands Reserve Program. It gives financial help, technical advice, encourages people to restore forests and wetlands on their own land.
How much land are we talking?
Over 148,000 acres protected or restored through programs like that. It just underscores how critical it is to engage private landowners. They own so much of the potential habitat.
Then there's the New England cottontail. Different from the common one, right? Needs specific habitat.
Yeah, needs that young forest, really thick undergrowth, and that habitat got lost and fragmented.
So what do they do?
Proactive state efforts, using things like state wildlife grants, focus specifically on creating and maintaining that kind of habitat, plus a captive breeding program.
And it worked.
So well that it didn't even need to get listed under the ESA in the end. They sort of headed off the crisis proactively.
That's great. And the Kirtland's warbler, another one needing really specific habitat linked to fire.
Yeah, young, dense jack pine forest. Historically, wildfire created that, so recovery needed a kind of two-pronged approach. Okay.
First, managing the habitat clearing, planting jack pine, basically mimicking fire safely. But second, and this was key, aggressively removing parasitic brown-headed cowbirds.
The nest parasites.
Exactly. Since 1972, they've been trapping cowbirds in the warbler's breeding areas. Cowbirds lay eggs in warbler nests. The bigger cowbird chicks outcompete the warbler chicks.
So removing them helped nesting success.
Dramatically. That, plus the habitat work, pushed the warbler population way past recovery goals, led to delisting. Shows you sometimes have to hit multiple threats at once.
All right, moving beyond the sort of traditional conservation, some innovative stuff is mentioned too, like Spotify, recognizing nature as an artist.
Yeah, the Sounds Right project. It sounds a bit conceptual, maybe. But the idea is concrete.
Generate money for conservation.
Exactly. Streams of nature sounds generate royalties, just like music, and that money goes to global conservation groups. They're projecting something like $40 million.
Wow, that's creative.
Using tech and culture in a new way for funding, yeah. And Coldplay. using recycled plastic for vinyl records.
Yeah, their Moon Music album, using what, 9 plastic bottles per record, cuts the carbon footprint for the vinyl itself by 85%.
That's significant.
And their CDs use 90% recycled materials, too. It's an example of an industry just looking at its own footprint and trying to find ways to reduce impact. Every bit helps, right?
Definitely. Okay, back to science for a second. There's some hopeful news about that chytrid fungus that's been so devastating for frogs.
Oh yeah, the amphibian apocalypse fungus, it's been terrible worldwide.
But frogs in Yosemite, Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frogs, seem to be developing immunity.
That's what it looks like. Natural resistance evolving in a wild population. That is potentially huge news. It offers this glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, some amphibian populations might be able to withstand it long term.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And maybe the most cutting-edge thing mentioned, black-footed ferret conservation. A clone had babies.
Yeah, Antonia. A clone. Successfully gave birth to 2 healthy kits. Black-footed ferrets are super endangered, rely on prairie dogs. Right. And they went through a massive genetic bottleneck. Very little diversity left makes them vulnerable, so cloning, using genetic materials stored from decades ago.
It's a way to bring back lost genes.
Potentially, yeah. It's exploring ways to boost genetic diversity, make the population more resilient alongside the existing breeding and reintroduction programs. It's pretty futuristic stuff.
So all these individual stories are great, but is there bigger picture evidence that this stuff generally works?
There is. The sources highlight this first-of-its-kind study, really comprehensive, looked at 665 conservation projects all over the world.
665, wow.
Yeah.
And what did it find?
The message was incredibly clear. Conservation efforts work, most of the time.
Really?
Yeah. The analysis showed that conservation actions either improved biodiversity or, at very least, slowed down the decline over 2/3 of the time.
Over 2/3. That's significant.
It really is. It provides that crucial data-driven proof. What we're doing, when we do it right, actually achieves its goals on a global scale.
That evidence is so important. Because, even with all these amazing successes, the challenge is still huge, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources are clear on that, too. Something like 12,000 species still identified as needing conservation help.
And funding is an issue.
Funding is a major gap. Current levels just fall way short of what's needed to tackle the problem at scale. It's a critical barrier to doing more of what we know works.
Which is where something like the Recovering America's Wildlife Act comes in. That gets mentioned.
Exactly. That's proposed legislation. The aim is to provide significant, dedicated funding every year, like $1.4 billion, specifically for state and tribal conservation work.
So more proactive, before species get endangered.
That's the idea. Get ahead of the crisis, prevent listings in the first place. It just reinforces that core message we've seen again and again. Investing in conservation works. It yields real results.
So when you wrap it all up, this deep dive, we've seen such a range. Big policies like the ESA, huge habitat projects like Klamath, specific species work like the condor or the gecko, even these unexpected things like Spotify. They're all contributing. They're bringing wildlife back.
Yeah.
It's concrete proof that conservation actually works.
Absolutely. These aren't just, lucky breaks or isolated incidents. They show patterns. Collaboration works. Governments, NGOs, communities, scientists.
Even industry is getting involved.
Yeah. These stories are just powerful reminders that human effort, when it's focused, when it's sustained, based on good science, it really can turn things around. We can reverse these negative trends.
So thinking about that clear evidence conservation works and knowing the scale of the challenge that's still out there, it makes you wonder, right? What could happen if we really amplified these proven approaches, if we kept innovating?
Yeah.
And maybe thinking about everything we talked about today.
Yeah.
What role could you, listening right now, play in maybe supporting that next wave of conservation wins?